All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Living the Life Show. I'm your host, Columbus Cody, and I'm so glad you chose to join me today for our next interview. This interview is going to be awesome. It's going to be fun. We have a very special guest today, Mr. Paul Mignard, and he is going to share with us about his gifts, his talents, and how he gives those or renders those unto the Lord. So welcome to the show, Mr. Paul Mignard. Hey, what's going on,
Hey,
Paul?
hey, Columbus. I'm doing good. How are you doing? Thanks for
Oh,
having me.
thank you so much for being a special guest. The first time I saw some of your work on Instagram, I was blown away, and I said, "Man, one day I'm going to connect with that guy and learn a little bit about what he does." And every time I see a new posting, I'm just baffled by the gift that God has given you and how you're using it. So, thank you so much for your time.
Oh man, I'm humbled you would say that. Thank you. No, I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. All right. So every podcast, we try to get a chance to know our guests just a smidgen. So I got a few questions for you. Are you ready?
Yes.
All right. What's your favorite breakfast item?
Oh man, I love breakfast. I like the traditional breakfast, like the full pancake, eggs, and sausage and that kind of deal. So I would probably say if I had to throw it all away, and I would probably go with pancakes.
Pancakes. Can't go wrong with that.
100%.
And you're in Virginia, correct?
I am. I'm in Lynchburg, Virginia, right there in the middle.
Yeah. I was stationed in Norfolk, Virginia, years and years ago. So I'm not too far from where you were. Or
Okay.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah,
yeah,
we've been over there a few times.
yep.
It's pretty impressive. I was in the army myself, so we never got whenever we get near the big ships, like, oh my gosh, what? How do these? This is amazing. Every
It
time
is
I'm at,
amazing. The first time I saw it, I was blown away myself. So yeah, and thank you for your service. I did not know you were a veteran, so thank you so
no,
much.
no, same to you, same to you.
All right, so what's your favorite book of the Bible?
Oh wow, I mean, that's a hard one, right? James is probably my favorite. I like books that inspire action. And I
Hmm.
feel like James is at the top of that list. I've done an exercise. I haven't done it lately, but I used to do this exercise where I would rewrite, not transpose or like rewrite my own over, but literally just write out the chapters of James. And it's
Hmm.
such a small book, but every time it was always like okay, this is great stuff. This is amazing. This is it's that tangible like command to go do something amazing today. So
Hmm.
I would probably start with James.
So would you write out the books like that? Like what did what made you do that the first time, and like what have you found that has done for you?
I find, kind of, not to jump into the art discussion, but I find I learn better when I'm actively engaging with content. So reading to me is very passive in that I try to read and I try to read a lot, but very quickly, my mind either wanders or all of a sudden I'll look up and I'm like, I just read pages and I have no idea what
Hmm.
just happened. So I always find that actually physically writing, engaging with the content that way helps me actually learn better than just passive reading. Even when I read, just we did a thing with our church where we read through the Bible through in 6 months, but it was
Hmm.
like small enough to where I was like, okay, I can handle 5 chapters. Like I can get this and comprehend what's there. But writing is always like, man, if I write it just seems to lock itself in there a lot better.
Awesome, awesome. That's really cool. So you guys actually finished it in 6 months.
We did. I'm afraid to say there's parts where I dropped out, right? that daily practice. But yeah, we did it. We did it in 6 months. I actually would love to start up again because it was really, it's always fascinating to me that you can be a Christian, you can read the Bible, and then when you reread sections that you've already read, you get just like brand new stuff that you've
Hmm.
never caught before. So it was super interesting in that case. But yeah, we read through the whole thing. Now we're going back and we're doing the New Testament and parts of Psalms, I believe, for the next 6 months. So
Awesome, awesome. So James is your favorite book. All right. Here's your next question. What's your favorite piece of equipment that you use to make your art?
right now it's the iPad Pro. So I've actually got one of the new ones, but I've got the 12.9 iPad Pro with the Apple Pencil, and that's become my mainstay. I used to, I used to use paper. I used to buy a lot of pens and ink and dabble with that stuff. I used to have a whole setup with like the Wacom Cintiq with the whole thing and the cords everywhere and all that. But really, the iPad, being able to draw directly on it with the Apple Pencil, has kind of revolutionized my art in that sense, because it's so easy to just pick up. The apps are great; they never crash. Everything's already saved. It's just one of those like no brainers. Like, okay, you don't need a whole lot of equipment. You have this thing. You get to the blank page super quick, and you can start making on it. So the iPad, 100% number one.
Awesome. Yeah, it's funny. I can't remember the name of the app now. I downloaded it. It cost like $10. I downloaded it for my son, and then he stopped drawing stuff. I was like, dude, I just paid $10 for. I've never paid $10 for an app, and I did that for you. And I can't remember the name of it, but it's like powerful. You might have it on your iPad as well.
It's probably Procreate. That's the one.
It, Procreate.
Yeah,
Yep.
that one is pretty. It's simple enough to where you can get started just doing things, but it's powerful enough to where you can really, yeah, you can go full bore on it. I'm nervous about it because I did the same thing you did. I paid $10 for it like 4 years ago, and I've never paid for it again. Like, I'm nervous someday that Adobe is going to like snatch them up for like $1 billion and then force me to pay $20 a month or something.
Yeah.
I'd be forced to. I'm like, it's so good. I would totally put myself.
So that
on
is
table.
what you use. You use Procreate.
Yes. Yeah, I do. I use Procreate primarily. Every now and then I'll drop into there's a vector editing program called Affinity Designer, and I'll use that if I'm going to do something very large and I need it to be vectorized. I'll drop into that. But yeah, I've completely. I used to do a fair amount of desktop like Adobe products. Like, I used to use Illustrator and some Photoshop here and there. But yeah, now I'm 100% Procreate and sometimes an Affinity product.
Awesome. Okay. So who in the Bible do you say who do you feel like you relate to the most? And tell me why.
Wow, that's a big question. Who do I relate to the most? Man, you got me with a big one there. We started with breakfast, and now it's who do I relate to the most?
Like, who do you think like your life kind of is the most symbolic of that person? Like, you identify with them the most.
Man, that's a hard one. I would almost say Peter in a sense, because I can be very impulsive, sometimes to my own detriment. I'm definitely not. I don't identify with a lot of Old Testament people because fortunately I've had a very great life. Like, I'm very happy with everything. I don't feel like God's punished me in any way. But yeah, if I had to on the spot, which I guess I would say Peter. Just that impulsive, like 1 second, like I'm gonna change the world. I'm gonna do everything for you, Lord. Then the next second, just that 180, like everything's changed. So I'll go down that road.
Great choice. He's one of my favorite characters. So yeah,
okay.
you're in good company. All right, last question before we jump into the meat. What's the best book you've ever read? And I like to ask all of my guests this for two reasons. One, I get a chance to learn about a new book, and two, the viewers and listeners. I've had so many who have listened to the guests and say, "Wow, that book that they had recommended was awesome." So, the best book you've ever read, what would you say?
Oh gosh, man. I'm going to cheat and I'm going to name two. Can I do two?
And look, I have them do that to me too. So that's two books now that we get a chance to log up.
All right, I'm going to sneak in there. The number one, the one that changed things for me as an artist, and I think it applies to all artists, musicians, videographers, everybody, is The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. And that's the one that kind of, it's funny, it doesn't really change anything, but he normalizes that feeling of resistance that artists have, that idea that like artists are people that are inspired and only create when it's time to create. And he kind of turns that on his head, where it's like, no, if you want to be an artist, amateurs, go out and create when they're ready to create, and amateurs, do things on a whim. He's like, if you want to be a professional, you do things on a schedule and you have discipline, all these things that really help your artistic career. Or just, I don't even want to say career, just help you be an artist. He puts light to that. And especially the idea of resistance, where you're trying to go down a path artistically that you're having to force yourself down and how that's actually a natural part of the process. That uncomfortable, like, ooh, I don't know if I want to do this.
Right.
He puts a good light on it.
Mm.
And the other one would be Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon. And that one is great because it's a little more tactical, but it's one of those types of books that's like, here's how to create art, and here's how we've always created art as a people. It's by taking things that have been done before and putting your own spin on it and pushing them forward, kind of thing.
Still like an artist or from an artist.
Steal like an artist,
Mm.
but it probably could be steal from an artist as well.
That is cool. That is cool. That's two books I'm gonna have to check out. All right. So for all my artists out there, you've heard two great books that you can put on your list to check them out. All right. Are you ready to dive in now?
Yes.
All right.
Yes,
So
let's do it.
share with me a little bit about what led to you surrendering your heart to God. Like, how did that happen? Were you born in the church? Did you meet somebody one day and they shared the gospel? How did it happen for you?
So I was saved in high school. So I actually grew up, I live in Virginia. I grew up in Las Vegas. My dad was in the military. We moved around a lot. We landed in Las Vegas, and that's where elementary school to high school, that's where I grew up. My parents were not religious. Like, we didn't go to church. They were very moralistic in a sense. It was weird because I had friends that went to church, but their families were a little like damaged and had things going on. And my parents had a great relationship. They were teetotalers. Everything was great. So it was really odd in that sense. But in high school, I was saved. I had a friend. We were on the swim team together, and he led me to the Lord. And kind of started that conversation. Right, I was baptized. I went to church. There was a period of falling away where I think I lost my way. Joined the Army, found my way again, got married, and have just been growing ever since. So it's been I don't have that story of like redemption from disaster, although I guess we all do in a sense.
Mm-hmm. No, you're right.
At different degrees, but I wasn't like saved from drugs or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it was. I like to say it starts the conversation because, I didn't think about Jesus or salvation or the Lord or any of that until I was witnessed to, until I was baptized. And then I feel like after you start that, like, you can't ever leave it. Like, it's always there tugging at you, so to speak. So, but no, and obviously I live in Central Virginia. I used to work at Liberty University. We're in that kind of the Bible Belt, like right in the middle of it. Right. So, the conversation's just always getting stronger, so to speak.
Yeah. Now, do you remember what your friend in high school said that made you receiving Christ, like it made it seem so clear for you?
Wow, that's a good question. No, I do remember the day he invited me to church. I remember us being on the bus and going to swim practice, and him saying like, "You should totally come to church with me." And I was like, "Okay, let's go to church together." And it was great. I don't know. It clicked. I mean, I didn't. It was funny because I feel like sometimes people get the emotional aspect of being saved, but I had like the logical aspect. It was like, oh, this totally makes sense. The whole like, oh, we're doomed for hell, and there's the Savior. Like, why wouldn't I, put those two together?
Now, so you grew up in a home where, like you said, the morals were there. You were taught how to be a decent person, but the spirituality per se, the actual relationship to Christ wasn't there. Since you were saved, did you have an effect on your family at all? Did any of them convert because after watching you?
Wow, that's a good question. In some aspects, no. I've got a brother. He's not saved. Again, great guy, perfectly wonderful person, lovely person to be around, not saved. My parents, they are very traditional in a sense. So they were raised Southern Baptist. They both grew up in the deep South down in Florida. And I believe that they're saved. So, kind of like I was, the conversation, was light at times. Maybe when we were growing up and moving around a lot, it wasn't as strong.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I feel like like they're okay. So I guess like all families, there's things to work on, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and so important, like you said, for you, you may be the one that God pulled out to shine that light later for your brother, for your parents, to where it becomes, like you said, it's a logical decision for me to make. I never even saw it from that perspective until my brother shared it with me, or till my son shared it with me. So, you keep shining your light, because you never know the great impact that you're having on your family. And they may never even tell you, they may
mm,
never say it to
right.
you. They may just one day pop up in somebody else's church, and it's because of the light that you've shown all these years. So keep shining over there.
Oh yes, will do.
Now, when did you find out, or when did you notice that you had an artistic talent?
I've always been a drawer of sorts, so I never did anything serious with it though, so I took art, like in school when you had an elective, right? Instead of wood shop, I would take art,
Hmm.
so that was about the extent of it. I didn't go to college for it or anything. Um, it was just always something I was a little good at, so I didn't really do anything with it for a long time. Every now and then I'd make a shirt or something, like when I was in the army, right? We had shirts and like, oh, we need a bulldog drawn. And I was like, I could draw a bulldog, kind of thing. So I mean, I did little things like that,
Mm.
but never really went forward with it. It wasn't until I really started doing sermon sketches is when it really blew up for me. As far as desiring to do better, desiring to do something with it, and even like I described before, when you asked the technology question,
Hmm.
before it was always there was a lot of friction to do art, right? Like, oh, let me get out my paper and pens and let me, find this one spot to do it. Or even when I went digital, like, oh, let me get my computer out and hook up my tablet and da 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 da. Um, so the iPad really changed a lot of that for me because I could go from nothing to like, all right, blank page, work, export, post, like the whole process just synced up a lot better.
Mm.
Sorry, I
Beautiful.
kind of lost the question there a little bit,
No, no,
but
no, no. That's totally
hopefully.
fine. Because, I was going to ask you if you ever had any special training, but you just said, no, you've never really been trained in that. You never went to college for this art. And, which is baffling because, like I said, I am super impressed with how you put things together, and how you've, you know, uh, just thinking about a sermon in general, and how you take the sermon and make art from the sermon. And people say a picture says 1,000 words, or even how people who are visual learners, they see your photo, your artwork, and they're like, I totally get that sermon. I totally understand, or I see the depth
Mm,
in what is being explained or expressed through this message through a picture. And I just, like I said, it blew my mind the first time I saw that. But how did you come up with the name Sketchy Sermons?
so I stole it, right? Steal like an artist. I had reserved the domain name a while ago, um, but there was a guy, Kirby Rosanes, on Facebook, and he always went by Sketchy Stories, and he
Mm-hmm.
did this like doodle art thing, which you've probably seen, where it's like you just fill the page, right? Just like complexity and whatnot. And I always liked the name, so I kind of took a hold of it, and it had a little bit of a connotation, like the sketchy sermon part,
Mm-hmm.
which I get a sideways comment every now and then, like, wow, that really is a sketchy sermon, like I get it. So it was a little playful in that sense too.
Yeah.
Like, so I don't know, it just fit. It had the alliteration, the domain name was available, so I went with
Yeah.
it.
And to me, I thought that was very crafty. The title, sketchy sermon, like you said, because when you hear the word sketchy, you automatically think, I don't know if I'm going to listen to that sermon.
Right,
But,
right, yeah,
but then you start thinking the play on the words with the sketch. And I like how you threw that in again. Still like an artist. I like that. I
right,
like
yeah.
that.
It's a little.
I
I like the
like
name
it.
because it's a little dangerous. Like you said, it's like a little like I don't know if I want to partake in this, but
So walk me through your process of creating art from a message. How does that normally work?
well, I try to. It depends. So my home church is Thomas Road Church here in Lynchburg. And that church actually publishes their outline every week. So it's a pretty standard, like 3 to 4 point bullet sermon. So I can kind of plan out where it's going to go on the page in that sense. But if I'm doing a new sermon or a new church that I've never been to, it's usually a 2-pass process. So I will listen to the sermon. I'll try to catch like the main points of the notes. And it depends on the style of sermon. I find a lot of them do have points, and the pastor will literally say, like, my first point is, or, finally, that kind of gives clues to like, here's their points are. Some are just out there, like Pastor Younger at the Ramp Church. He preaches for like 3 hours, and we are going all different ways when we do his sermon. So it's a different approach depending on who's speaking. It does kind of make it fun that way. If it was just the same, like, all right, we're doing the same thing every time, I think it might get kind of old. But no, it changes. It depends. Now, I do find I'm doing a lot more quote sketches than sermon sketches, just because I feel like a lot of people, especially for social media, sometimes the full on sketched out sermon can be a lot. Like, there's a lot of content there. And there's a lot of times too where I put, if the pastor says something, I try to include like the inside jokes and the little things like that in there. But like I said, sometimes that little square can only contain so much. So,
right.
But it depends. And that's kind of the fun part of it. The process keeps changing, so to speak. So I try to do it quick in a sense. I know there's whole companies that do this stuff live where they just have the giant piece of paper, like the sketch effect, and they're doing it live and everything works out. I'm not there yet. So I have to listen to it. I kind of map out where it's going, and then I'll usually swing around another time and like refine and put everything together.
That is awesome. That is really cool. Really cool. Let's talk about a specific piece of your art. And I want you
All
to just
right.
walk me through, as we're looking at that piece, walk me through what we're looking at and how this, because it might not have been a sermon, but then again, it could have been. So walk me through
Okay.
this. As you're looking at this on your screen now, you see that this was something you created for Pray. Now, tell me a little bit about this. Like, what prompted this, or what inspired this artwork?
Yeah. So this one, I've done a couple of these. Before I did sketchy sermons, I did some where it would be like that word and it would have stuff around it. I think the first one I did was the phrase "be awesome," and it was surrounded by octopuses, right? So there was no letters there, but the octopuses and the tentacles and all that like made the graphic. I did one for Run that was kind of popular, just Run with all kinds of like running paraphernalia. This one is more of just a exercise and just drawing. It's like I map out the word pray, and then it's like, all right, let's start at the bottom and just fill it up. My thinking on this one though, I remember as I was doing it, the idea that just life is full of all this stuff, right? Like, it's almost kind of, the basement's full of stuff, the house is full of stuff, the car's full of stuff. And sometimes that act of prayer, the simplest part of our lives, can get so complicated when everything's wrapped around it. So just that idea of like hidden underneath all this stuff, is the command to pray. The connection with God is there, buried beneath all the things that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So I don't know if it started out with that kind of connotation, but that's where it ended up. Because I think at the end, I put some signs in there that was like, consume more, buy more stuff, this thing that the world tells us, the thing that, society and our culture sometimes, like, you can solve your problems if you just buy these things,
Right.
and
Yeah.
just the idea of like, oh, behind all that is the one thing that can, solve your problems.
And it's funny because how they say art is subjective, right? It's like everybody sees something different or is it objective? Subjective.
Subjective. Yeah.
Yeah, art is subjective. Everybody sees something different. And so when I saw that, I was like, all of these things, like you said, we have to pray through them. There was like a serpent in there, so I saw the snake, which I'm terrified of snakes, but you got to pray through. And I saw the sign, like you mentioned, about consume more. We have to find, if we pray, we'll navigate through all of these things through our prayer life. And that's what I felt from looking at that. And like I said, 10 people could look at that same picture and see 10 different things. They've been ministered to in 10 different ways. So, that's why I really enjoyed looking at, the works that you've done and all the different the pieces that I've seen on Instagram, and I saw, like lately you did one where you did a gentleman and you actually put the red on his sweatshirt, and I was reading your blog and you were like, I just
Yeah.
had to add that color. I don't plan to continue to do that, but the color was so vivid and so eye catching. I had to add that into the pastor's jacket, and I just thought it was so creative and so cool how you use your gifts and your talents to just really paint a picture that is, to me, it's a beautiful way of expressing your faith to others.
Oh, thanks. Well, I'd love to say that the color usage is a purposeful process, but really it's a constraint because I'm colorblind. I have a red green deficiency, so I don't trust the colors that I pick. So I'm okay with one color because I can go look up the hex code on the internet and see like, okay, this says it's red. I can believe it's red, and I'll go with that. But generally, I avoid color just because I don't trust my eye when I see it.
And that is unreal. Just to think how good God is and how God has created us. He's given you a gift to make art, and yet your eyes can't see color. You know what I'm saying? So it's like you're overcoming a deficiency over here and making art to where you have to give God glory for it. You know what I mean? It's just it's awesome. That's really cool. Pretty cool.
Oh yeah, yeah. That, and it speaks directly to my style too, because some people will be like, how do you get to that style? How do you do that? And that's why my style's kind of typified by bold lines, white and black, shades of gray. And it's, on one hand, I could be like, oh no, why can't I use color? But I don't know, if I had color vision, if everything was perfect, maybe my work wouldn't look like this, certainly. And maybe it would just kind of look like everybody else's. And it just, so no,
Yeah.
to your point, I'm thankful for that deficiency, especially in light of all the other deficiencies I have. I'm very thankful that that's the one I've got. So,
But I mean, like you said, I mean, as my pastor said before, God doesn't make Xerox, right? You are a special
right.
person. Your gift, your talent, and sure, there's probably many other people in the world who can draw like you can draw and can try to replicate what you do, but yet that's what God gave you. And what they'd be doing would be replicating, and you are creating something, to me, that's genuine. I haven't seen anything like this, and I'm gonna tell you what it reminds me of too. Sometimes you remember back in the early '90s or the mid '90s with the basketball T-shirts, like with the teams, and they have the like Michael Jordan and Larry Bird and Magic Johnson on the T-shirts, and
Right.
that type of style reminds me of those old school T-shirts, and I just loved it.
Okay.
I just
Okay.
loved it.
No,
Yeah.
I'll take that.
Now, have you ever sensed God speaking to you as you've been creating the art?
Yeah. I mean, I try to be very purposeful when I do this because there have been times where I'm going down a road and it's like I have to check myself, like, am I doing this for likes and attention, or am I doing this because this is what God wants me to put out there? So yeah, I try to be very purposeful when I do this. That was one of the reasons when I first started, I didn't want to take any money, right? So the whole idea of like making money or making this a business or monetizing my account or doing any of that stuff, it was like, let me put that far away so that I can concentrate on doing this for, the good of doing it, for the reason that God wants me to do. So I don't want to say like, oh, everything's altruistic and I'm perfect in my execution, but I do try to prayerfully put up content that God wants me to put up and to create things that he wants me to put up, and to make sure that I'm not doing it for the likes and the follows and all that stuff. Cause it's an easy road to go down. When you get a piece and it pops, it feels great. You're like, oh, this is amazing. I want to do this all the time. And it's like, I don't know. I don't ever want to get to the point where I would turn down putting up a piece that says something amazing because the person only has 300 followers, and they might share it, but then it's not big. Like, I need somebody with 40,000 followers. You know what I mean? Where you go down that road where you're just kind of like chasing the dragon, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I try to be very purposeful in that, the content I put up is curated. It's like you said, genuine is really important to me. Cause I'm not making money off of this. Right. So I'm not supporting my family off of it. Well, I do get a commission every now and then. Right. So I'm not 100% not funded.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't pay any bills or anything like that. So
Yeah, and like I said, I think what you said was beautiful too, as it relates to trying to remain humble from this. Because like you said, if the right person sees what we do, it can blow up to where your life could change forever. But do I want my life to change if it's going to lead me away from God? That's always been my
right.
motivation, right? So, like I've written 3 books. My first book is a spiritually based book. And I don't know how many copies I've sold, not very many, I mean, from on a big scope of things, but I've gotten feedback from people who have told me how much the book has impacted them. Hearing that was all that I needed. Knowing that what God had placed in me to share did not fall on deaf ears, was not in vain. I'm good. Now, of
Mm,
course, if the Lord made it to where you could sell 1 million copies, to God be the glory, but that's not my motivation. And I think when we
right.
keep our motivations pure, He'll make room for those commissions that you're not expecting, or you weren't seeking these things, but He places them in your lap because He knows you've been faithful over a few things. I'm going to reward you and place you over greater things because you're not going to let it go to your head, and you're not going to forget that I'm the one that gave you power to pick up that Apple Pencil and sketch that beautiful sermon.
Right.
And not only did you get paid from it, but you blessed 1,000 people every time they see that mural or that painting or that sketch that you did. When they see that, hearts are actually touched, they're warmed, they're massaged to where I can allow my spirit now to convert them. That's what He's looking for. And because you have that heart, I wouldn't be surprised if down the road, you end up with more commissions, because your desire isn't to break the bank off of what I'm doing. My desire is to glorify you. And, in the meantime, if the Lord blesses me beyond that, to God be the glory.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, you said it beautifully. That's exactly it. And it's really been impressed upon me too, the whole idea of enjoying being small, right? So it's like right now I'm like, for Instagram I'm close to like 4,000. But it's fine. That's that if I never got another follower, if I just stayed with the people I'm with, I've met some amazing people on Instagram. We've had some great conversations. It's led to things like this where I
Hmm.
can talk to you. And honestly, if I woke up tomorrow and I had 100,000 followers and like 1,000 commissions, it'd be a nightmare. Like I wouldn't be at the place where I could even handle it.
Right.
Like I've seen, I think uh, uh, Ben Kirby over at Preachers and Sneakers, or somebody did something to one time where they're like, look at my DMs. And it was just like whew, screen after screen after screen. And that would I couldn't handle that. So
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
love this idea of like, you know what, if God wants me to just be here and just do it at this much, like I'm fine with that.
I'm
So it's
totally
it's
okay
not a
with that.
problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think everybody thinks they want to be famous until they're famous. Because they look at famous people, they're like, oh my God, I wish I could have a moment to myself. I wish I could be normal again. It's like, and all the normal people, we're like, man, I wish I was like them. And God is like, don't envy that. You
Mm-mm.
don't realize how fortunate you are to be in the position you're in. You're blessing people right where you are. And I know because, TD Jakes has 20 million people watching him, you don't feel as important, Pastor so and so, because you only have 30 people in your congregation. You be the best pastor to those 30 and lead them the best you can. Don't worry about what you're seeing on TV. And I don't say that to put down TD Jakes or anything. I'm just saying TD Jakes has a platform that a lot of other preachers
Right.
wish they had, until they have that platform. And then they find out all the headaches and all of the stress that TD Jakes may be under that doesn't show up on the TV screen. He's
Right.
managing a multi I mean, humongous church and millions of other projects and all that. These other pastors have no idea what's going on with that. They just want that limelight. And when they want the limelight, the Lord is left out of the equation. So here it
Right.
is, you and I, we just want to be a blessing to the few followers we got, and we're
Right.
good with
Yeah.
it. And we're good with that, you know. But at the same
Yep.
time, never wanting to stop the hand of God. If God desires for your artwork to be this big because it's going to bring more people to him, God, I'm your vessel, do as you please. But if you're okay with me staying right here, Lord, I'm okay with staying right here, you know. And
Right.
that's the
Yeah.
best place to be.
And for me, it was, I mean, there's some pragmatism to that too. When I first started, because I haven't verbalized it, but I've got this idea of tiny art in my head, right? So if you make something to make big art, you have to be like if you're going to do something that appeals to a lot of people, right? Like speaking as an artist, like I'm going to draw a picture of Wolverine, right? So I can get 12 million views. Like your picture in that scale has to be so good. Like you got to be in the top tippity top percent. And your message or your take on it has to be so unique that people would actually appeal to it. But on the tiny art scale, like if I'm drawing a picture of a pastor delivering a sermon to 100 people, like he is not expecting it. Nobody else is engaging with him that way. And honestly, my art doesn't have to be up there. That I would take the time to do something like that has the impact at
Mm-hmm.
this scale. So yeah, exactly like you're saying, like I don't know. I think sometimes we get in this thing where we want to be big, but we don't realize what the cost is for that. Because, like you're saying, if there's a pastor that's preaching to 100 people now, and TD Jakes was like, "Hey, quick, can you come pitch it for me?" And you got to speak to 12 million people. Like you're not there. You don't have the skills yet to
Right,
to
right,
bring it. So
right.
that is not God putting you in a good situation. That
Mm,
you might be in there to your own detriment. So
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
like you were
Absolutely.
saying, I am happy to be here and to, I don't know, it's almost like we're honing our skills, right? Like we're putting in the work and we're
Mm-hmm.
spending the time, because if that call does come, we want to be ready. We don't want to have the skills that don't hit it. If I do have a picture that blows up someday, like almost like a band, they
Mm-hmm.
put out a record and everything's great, but that follow-up record is always hard. Like
You
oh,
don't
you
want
didn't sell a million
to,
copies, like
you don't
we
want
got
to
to
be
let
the
you
one
go.
hit wonder, huh?
Right, yeah, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah. And I think, the main thing is if we have the pure motives, if our motives, our desires are in line with what God wants for us, everything else takes care of itself. It's like you said, though, it's so easy to fall into the trap of trying to do what is catchy, do what is popping, do what is demanded, and we end up compromising our integrity of what God has placed in our hearts to do. And that's what we don't want. We definitely want to continue to honor him with the gifts that he's given us. We render it back to him and let him decide how it goes from there. And like you said, in the meantime, the process that we're under as we're honing our skills and improving what we do, even in this meantime, we may not even be thinking 10 years down the road where God is going to take us. We're just trying to make
Mm,
today, we're trying to serve him with excellence today. And of course, if we continue to serve with excellence, you're going to have no choice but to continue to grow in what you do. And then 10 years from now, I may have to have you back on the podcast. And, then you'll be like, I don't know who that guy is.
right,
Call my secretary. my
right.
secretary's secretary.
Oh man, yeah,
Now,
I don't know, I hope not, I hope not.
now, if you could link up with one speaker or one preacher in particular to do a drawing for them, who would you pick?
Man, that's a hard one to answer, because the fortunate thing with COVID is that all the preachers went online. And it's been, for the last year, there's on one sense, like there was the very bad parts of the pandemic, right? But there was also this part where it was like every preacher in the country is now available to every person in the country. So it was like this mass explosion. I will say there's one preacher who every time I'm scrolling through YouTube and I come up on his stuff, I'm like, all right, I'm going to start listening to that. And that's Robert Madu, and he is down in Dallas. I can't remember the name of his church. It's escaping me. Um, Man, what is the name of his church? Robert Madu. Might be
So,
Madu. I might be saying that totally wrong.
so you enjoy his messages, or like what is it that makes him appealing?
I don't know. They hit. Let's see. Yeah, he used to speak at Elevation. He is now. What is that? Social Dallas. That's. I'm sorry.
Okay.
It gets in the mind, and I can't put it out. He kind of. I do really well with preachers that tell a story, right?
Mm.
So the ones that are like, um, kind of make it relatable and bring out storytelling, that aspect to it,
Mm-hmm.
are really engaging to me. Not that I don't like the ones that are like, look, we're just going verse by verse in the Bible. Those are great too, but his are so entertaining. But he does this switch, right, where it's almost like you're watching like a stand-up performance, and then all of a sudden, like, whoop, oh, we just swung back to the message and to the Bible and what he's talking about, and it hits so well. So he's a very talented speaker, great voice, great presence, all those, and I just love his stuff. So every time he comes up, YouTube, the algorithm knows what I like, and
Mm-hmm.
he comes up often. So it's like, oh, if I'm making breakfast, if I'm going for a run, if I'm mowing the lawn, like, it's usually one of his things that I'm listening to. So he would probably be at the top, but man, I don't know. We live in this time where there is so much quality Christian content
Yeah.
available
Yeah.
totally for free. And, it's like I've got like it's like I used to listen to podcasts and I'll be like, all right, I've got like 4 or 5. And I just keep coming across them like yours, where it's
Mm-hmm.
like you find a podcast, you're like, oh, I love this person he's speaking to. And he's got like 50 past episodes. And now it's like, man, I want to listen to all these. So it's, man, I'm sorry. I went away again from the question. So
No, no,
Robert
no.
Madu,
That
he's
was
the
that
one.
was. I mean, definitely, you painted a picture for us all to understand why Pastor Madu or Robert Madu is someone you would like to sketch, and so for people who are also speakers or preachers who may be listening to this, understanding the impact of the storytelling and making the message relatable could be something that will also encourage them in their organization of their messages to where it can be more impactful as well. Like you said, there's nothing wrong with going verse by verse, precept by precept, but for many people who are learning out there, that style or that delivery might be hard for some people to absorb. I look at people like
Right.
Charles Stanley. For Charles Stanley to have so many followers, his style to a person that doesn't really love learning could be seen as it's slow, it's bland, it's boring. But when you love learning, you love listening to him speak because there's depth to it. There's power to it. There's truth in it. And because I just want to hear God's truth, I'm not trying to be necessarily entertained by the pastor. I don't need to hear the pastor hoop and holler and shout and do a backflip. I'm
Right.
good. I'm good.
Right.
I'm good listening to Charles Stanley because when I push the end of that message, I'm going to walk away with a word that can transform my life, that can truly encourage me to live for God. I can finish watching Pastor so and so, who it was live, the stage was jumping, but when he finishes preaching and the high wears down from the excitement that I just saw, I have no substance to live on. So, I
Right.
can definitely see, definitely the impact of telling the stories, making the message come alive, showing me how this word actually pertains to me in 2021. Oh, yeah, I'm listening to that. I'm following that. I'm part of that, for a person, especially for a person that doesn't have a deep love for God's word yet. They haven't learned to truly, I just want to learn, 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 learn.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely.
that's the best of both worlds, I guess. All
And that's
right.
great because I know, like you were saying about Charles Stanley, it's like if he's your first, pastor or your first preacher, it could be kind of, yeah, it's like a dry. But then, like, once you start to know the topics and everything, like, oh,
Hmm.
he's preaching on James. I love James. Let's hear what he
Right.
has to say.
Right.
And yeah, it hits. Yeah, you're
He's
100%.
like that teacher that if you love the subject they teach, even though they're not, I mean, he's not monotone like Ferris Bueller. Bueller.
Right? Yeah.
He's not like that, but he's so even keel that you gotta be willing to listen. And I want to learn. I'm taking notes. This is something I've always wanted to learn about. That's the way you do it. That's what you could follow behind. But if you're used to, like you mentioned, elevation. I think that's Stephen Furtick, right?
Right.
You're
Yeah.
used to hearing these pastors that have all of this energy and all of this excitement behind what they're teaching, and they're showing you this story, and then the screen behind them is following the message, and then you listen to Charles Stanley, and you're like, oh Lord, I can't do that one. But
Right.
it's
Yeah.
all in what your taste is, and at the same time, even with that, leaning on God to show us what is truth and what is not, because there's a lot of preachers out there that are very vivid and loud and bright, but they're not teaching God's true word. And that's where we have to be
Right.
careful, because yes, the message was exciting, but the message didn't lead me closer to the cross. The message didn't lead me closer to Christ. So, we have to be in tune, and that's why like I said, for me, when I look at your work, almost every one of the pieces that I've seen where you did the sketchy sermons, all the points that you brought forth were impactful,
Mm.
what's the word I'm looking for? They were thought provoking. They were challenging. A lot of them have challenging quotes that make me have to look within and to say, God, am I living up to that particular quote? And so that's why I say I commend you, take my hat off to you. I say, keep on shining over there.
No, thanks. And I'm trying to get better with that. It's at first it was like, oh, I'm drawing these sermons and I'm putting them up, and every now and then it's like, oh wait, I'm putting a sermon online. I'm not preaching, but like, is what I'm doing is presenting the gospel. So
Mm-hmm.
I, kind of like you asked earlier, like what about motivations and whatnot. Like, at first it wasn't. It was like, oh, here's my notes and here's what I learned. And there's definitely a sense of like, whew, okay, are we preaching the gospel here? Am I diluting the pastor's message? Because I certainly don't want to do that. I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to misrepresent. So there have been times where I'm like, oh man, I might need to rework this for a day before I just throw it up online.
Yeah, and two, I would say too, as you're listening to that message, that's what God gave you. So,
Mm,
Pastor said A, B, C, and you got A, B, C, but the way God showed you A, B, and C was interpreted in your drawing through this viewpoint. Even though you didn't take away from A, B, C, you didn't say A is right, B is wrong, C is right. Here's what, from what you just said, Pastor, when you said A, B, C, God showed me this. And now I still quote what you say, but the artwork behind what you said is what God placed in what the vision he gave me for your quote or your thought. And I think that's what your pictures do. It allows us
mm,
to see how God showed you what the pastor was saying, you know. And like I said before, that's the blessing of God's word. God can show 10 people in the room 10 different things hearing the same message, the same word. We all walk out, one, we should all walk out with an understanding of that the message was Christ centered, right? But two,
right.
we walk out with an individual word for ourselves. We walk out with something that pertains to me individually, and now I can use that and adopt that and implement that to grow in my own life. And I would assume that would be every preacher's greatest desire, is that when you walk out of this room, you walk out with something within you that might look different than what's in them, that's going to keep pushing you forward on the path to Christ. So that's what I would assume every preacher's hope.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's well said. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
All right. I always like to end every podcast with the same question, especially when I have a special guest. Who is the one person that you would say that lived like Christ before you that made you want to continue to chase after God? Who could you point to that says that person, because they did it right or they're striving to do it right, and I see that, it makes me want to be the greatest Christian I can be?
Man, I thought you were going to end on an easier one. Like, what's the slice of pizza right now that you want that you want to eat? You know, my dad has been. You know, I talked earlier like I wasn't raised in a religious home, like a moral home, though. But my dad is a person that unknowingly to him has represented Christ the most. He's a honest man, brutal integrity, something that is always, shown on me. Treats my mom, his wife, with respect, avoids vices, he's just not a cruel person, right? And he's been through a lot, right? Like he was a helicopter pilot in Vietnam, deployed to Desert Storm, been through a whole bunch of stuff, and still lives his life with happiness and grace and gratitude. Grew up dirt poor in Milton, Florida, like out like a suburb of Pensacola in a trailer home, so it's like he's got this story of just integrity and grace. He just embodies all these characteristics that I've seen displayed, without the stuff that comes with it, right? So I think sometimes you get people that are just flawed and broken. And man, where am I going with this? He's not the person that's always like, he's not a do as I say, not as I do type of person, right? And I think we've all seen those in the Christian sphere, right? Like the people who are preaching to you during the day and then screaming at their wife at night, or the people that are getting caught up in whatever or doing whatever. And it's an awful thing to see. But that quiet, humble, graceful generosity, that I saw modeled by my dad and still see modeled by my dad, is something that connects me. I'm like, this is, he's not out there proclaiming Jesus, right? He's not out there like asking me if I've done my Bible study today. But he's living a life of purpose and integrity and frankly, quietness. I think I might have already said that, but this desire to not be, in the spotlight, this desire to not be big, the desire to take care of my family, to work hard, to set a good example, to be kind to people, that frankly is just missing sometimes, right? Like it's just hard to find those people.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be my answer.
Awesome. I always like to give a shout out to that person, because the title of my podcast and YouTube channel is Living the Life, and when we do live the life, it impacts others. Even though we may never try to purposely impact them, we're making an impact. And your father, like you said, he's not out there knocking people over the head with the Bible, but his lifestyle is knocking people out. They're getting a chance to see Christ without him having to say Christ to them. He's expressing Christ in a way that it made you understand integrity. It made you see decency, kindness, gentleness, meekness, and so now here you are later down the road, you're striving to be a blessing in the world through your art and through your light. And it's because you had an example in your father that even though he may not have realized how he was being used or seen, he shined his light in a way that now encourages you and me and whoever watches and listens to this to shine their light as well. So we love to give your dad a shout out. So shout out to Mr. Paul Mignard's father.
There you go.
Shout out. All right. So tell me, before we sign off, where can the people find you other than, because I have your Instagram up, other than your Instagram, where else would you like people to find you?
I'm on all the social platforms. I shouldn't say all. I'm definitely not on TikTok, but I'm on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and I'm available all there. I do have a website, sketchysermons.com. It hasn't been updated because I've got a huge update coming out. I used to just post sequentially on my stuff there, but I've got this new update coming out that'll have some other stuff on it. So I'm not ready to reveal all that yet because I haven't finished making it all and don't want to make promises I can't fill. But yeah, the major social media platforms, my website, available at all those. I have small enough followers where I can actually respond to people's comments and questions in DMs. So feel free to hit me up. If you need anything or have any suggestions or anything like that, I'm open to all feedback.
Awesome. Thank you again, sir. I really appreciate you. And as I say to all my guests, I pray that what you have shared today will be an encouragement to someone else, and many others will seek to use their gifts to glorify the kingdom as well. So thank you so much. All right, everybody. That's the end of the show. You know what that means. Watch it, share it, and live it. Now let's get busy living the life. Did you know that you could actually support the YouTube channel and podcast? That's right. If you have a desire to be a blessing to the show, there's many different ways you can do it. We have Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, and you can use the website to make a donation. Any donation will help, and every donation will be used to pour into the lives of others. So if you want to click on the description of this video, you can find all of the information you need to make a donation. God bless you, and thank you for your support.